The Hoarder House and the Missing Cats. My cat has been missing for 2 weeks now. I raised him by hand. He's a little mama's boy, and he never leaves my side for more than an hour. So when I noticed he didn't come to bed that first night, I immediately knew something was wrong. For what I'm about to tell you to make sense, you need to understand that I love this damn cat so much. I have a tattoo of him on my chest next to my heart. He saved my life when I was really in a mental bad place. I would do anything to find him, so keep that in mind as you read this. When I realized he was missing, I posted his photo on every missing animals page I could find. I printed flyers. I went to the SPCA and every vet in my town to look for him. I didn't find him. Last night someone told me that it's a mating season for cats now. I live on the bottom side of the planet, so it's springtime now and it's sweltering. And that inactive males will often chase neutered males, like my kimchi, off their territory. They suggested I go door to door in my neighborhood and ask people if I can look under their sheds and in their crawl spaces, as cats who are attacked tend to go into hiding. I rose bright and early this morning and set out on my cat hunt. I dragged my very patient boyfriend Benjamin along to protect me from any creeps. I printed out another batch of flyers to take with in case I had to prove the legitimacy of my operation. Very few people actually let us onto their property. There were a few kind old ladies who just took some flyers and they offered to distribute at Bible study. One lady even offered us an ice cold glass of water, but most neighbors just squinted cautiously at our sweaty hands and foreheads as we desperately tried to persuade them of our innocence. At least take a flyer, sir, please. By noon, we still haven't had any trace of him. We sat down on a sidewalk under a tree. It was like the sun was screaming at us along the cicadas. I looked down at my legs and saw little beads of sweat trickle through the red dust that had by now collected in a thick layer of my calves. "Kiddo, hey girlie, what are you sitting there looking so droopy for?" A middle-aged man sporting a mullet, beer belly, and some Croc sandals waving at me from his open garage. His house looked like it was probably very snazzy back in the 70s, but then again, this whole neighborhood looks kind of like that. He seemed nice though, even though he wasn't wearing a shirt. I explained my situation. "Lost cat, eh? I see. I'll look up at my roof again. Them kids like to crawl up there and make a ruckus." He studied the flyer carefully, taking out a pair of reading glasses from the back pocket of his jean shorts. "I've seen this cat of yours. He's a darling. I've seen the others round them here beat him up bad though, screaming and howling, chasing him into that yard cross from here." I looked where he's pointed. I would have never noticed it if he hadn't pointed it out. You could really see the house for all the shrubbery. In front, it was a tall whitewashed wall with a rusted gate. It was clear someone had tried to burglar-proof the gate with some planks at some time. It was now hanging by its last hinge. I thanked the nice mullet man for the intel and watched him enter his home, closing his door and blinds behind him. My boyfriend and I approached the house across the street. The sidewalk was burst open from years of neglect, giving way to a forest of prickly weeds. I looked for a doorbell or a mailbox, but there was none. I peeked beyond the rusty gate. The yard was barren, except for the tall weeds. Everywhere there were piles of rubble, bricks and planks, perhaps a renovation project that was never completed. The wooden part of the front door was nailed and bolted, but the glass panels were mostly all missing. A scared cat could slip in there easily. I stepped into the yard. To my left, I saw an old metal shed, rusted half to hell. The top was covered by green plastic shade netting. A makeshift door made of plywood stood open, revealing the inside of the shed. The netting above made the inside glow dark green. Babe, this is trespassing," Benjamin called hesitantly. "Maybe you should just leave a flyer?" I ignored him. This place is clearly abandoned. Trespassing is the least of the crimes I would commit to find my cat. Movement from inside the shed caught my eye. "Kimchi! Here, kitty! Here, boy!" I called. The creature scurried away. It was a rat. A few more darted in the shadows. "Oh God," I exclaimed, suddenly feeling itchy all over. I hope he hasn't eaten all those rats. I'm not going any closer to the shed. I called his name a few more times, but to no avail. I tried looking into the house, but newspaper and black bags covered the windows. I would have to find a way around. I finally persuaded my boyfriend to join me in my crime. To be honest, I was getting pretty freaked out. I needed to hold his hand. We walked around the right side of the house, waving mosquitoes, flies, and gnats out of the way. When we got to the back of the house, the smell of feces hit me like a frying pan in the face. I could see the source of the smell though. What I did see were piles and piles of junk, old furniture, rubble, boxes, black bags everywhere. In the middle, there was an empty swimming pool. The sides were cracked with grass and weeds growing out, and at the bottom was a puddle of horrible brown sludge, almost obscured completely by gnats and flies. I called desperately to my cat, "Here, kitty, kitty! Here, kitty, kitty, kitty!" I'd hoped he would be hiding here, but the more I see of this place, the more I hope he isn't here. The smell of feces was so strong. I walked further into the property, calling out to him. I came round a corner. In front of me I could see windows, but these ones weren't boarded up, and they were open. But as I came closer, I realized that if he was indeed in the house, I wouldn't be able to get him. The inside of the house was stacked almost to the ceiling, full of the same kind of junk that was all over the backyard. This was the type of thing I thought I'd only ever see on TLC. I could see more rats running around inside. Then the smell hit us again. "Jesus, this is an absolute shithole," I said to Benjamin, covering my mouth. That's when I turned around and saw him. An old man, sitting on a plastic lawn chair in the shadow of the house. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, sir. I'm sorry. I was looking for my cat. We'll leave right away," I exclaimed, panicking and incredibly embarrassed. He had scared the shit out of me. He said nothing. He only studied us with his eyes. He was old but not ancient, and skinny, the sickly kind of skinny with gaunt cheeks and deep eye sockets. He was wearing a neat outfit, polo shirt tucked into some pressed pants, but despite this, I had a suspicion that he had been wearing the same pair of clothes for a very long time, as it was covered in stains. I approached him cautiously with a flyer. Have you seen my cat?" He stared at it for at least 5 seconds, then slowly stretched out an arm and took the paper from me, studying it further. I stood there awkwardly waiting for a reply, but he said nothing. Instead, he lowered his head, pressing the page onto his forehead, as if to wipe the sweat from his brow, but he kept it there, crumpling it against his face, and then he started to growl, like a dog. He was growling at me. I didn't know what to do, so I just started apologizing profusely for disturbing him. For some reason, I tried to take the offending flyer back from him, as if I was afraid he might harm the image of my cat. I wanted to rip it out of his hands. I don't really remember why I wanted to do that, or how close I was to this man, but Benjamin grabbed me by the arm, and half running pulled me out the front of the house, then ushered me into the street. When we were under safety, under the tree on the Mullets man's side of the house, he swung me around and looked deep into my eyes, as if checking if I still have all my marbles. We walked home in silence. I hope my cat comes home, or someone finds him and calls. Before this afternoon, I was afraid that my cat was hit by a car or something. Now I'm afraid that he might be hiding in that house with that man, and feces, and rats. I'm freaking out, even more now than I was before. I didn't even know that house was there, and I hope I never, ever see that man again. I just knew something was off. The police just left my home. A couple months ago, while house sitting and dog sitting for my parents, I had an eerie feeling. As an obsessive ID channel watcher and younger female, I played it off as paranoia. During these few days, whenever I took the dog out, he suddenly began sniffing areas he never sniffed before, particularly under each of our windows. And thankfully, it's because of him that I discovered 2 larger footprints under a window that directly looks into our living room and dining room. Around the same time, about 2 months ago, I noticed a man walking up and down our street that I'd never seen in the entirety of my life. Small Midwestern town. He also had, in my opinion, odd mannerisms, prolonged eye contacts, continued staring and craning his neck as he walked by and never returned my smiles, hellos, or waves. Eventually, I became irritated due to how creeped out I was with both him and the eerie feeling in general, and decided to wave. Upon no acknowledgement in return, I got up and acted like I was going to follow him down the street, to which made him walk faster and turn a sudden corner. Never saw him again. Now today, I helped my parents out by picking up their dog from the groomers, as it's right up the street and a safe suburban area. Oftentimes, I didn't unlock while running errands in town. When I returned home with the dog, I had an unexplained, horrible feeling. The minute I walked in the door, something, maybe a blanket seemed misplaced, something was off. I threw a load of laundry on in the basement. I quickly stood up and looked around. No one there. Then I proceeded to the bathroom and checked my makeup, and right then, I looked down and to my left, and there's feces in the toilet, with no toilet paper and not flushed. I've been the only one home all morning. I immediately throw back the shower curtain and start shaking, and when nothing is there, I close the bathroom door and lock myself inside. I call dispatch. They arrive in less than 2 minutes, search the entire property, make me check my laptop to see if any of the recent search history isn't my own, and check the fridge to see if the food is missing. All valuables are accounted for. I know this isn't my feces. No one in my family would have a bowel movement and not use the toilet paper or flush. I know someone has been in there. Yet because I love horror movies on the ID channel, they think I'm crazy. Hey dude, I now have my dad's hunting rifle and fillet knife on me, so please, let's not meet. The scary poop-smearing homeless man that wouldn't leave me alone. Hi all, long-time lurker, first-time poster on the subreddit and all that jazz. I've come to realize through reading so many posts on here that growing up and never really having any stability as far as home life is concerned, and being an extremely rebellious and awful teenager, that I have several stories myself that qualify for this subreddit, as I have unfortunately lived in and frequented many places during my lifetime that creepers seem to also inhabit as well. So I decided I might start sharing some of my stories for nothing else than just a therapeutic thing for myself to get them out there, you know? I'm no writer, so please excuse any mistakes, grammar, punctuation, etc. I tend to ramble, and I'm generally terrible at storytelling, so please bear with me while I get used to this. I'm trying my best here. I'll start with the first one that comes to mind. It's probably going to be long, so just a warning. Also very detailed, and maybe all the backstory isn't entirely necessary, but it's the only way I can tell it. In 2010, I gave birth to my middle child. He was born with some serious health issues, and ended up being hospitalized for several weeks when he was only a couple weeks old. He was so small, there wasn't a whole lot the doctors could do to help improve his condition, other than IVs, breathing machines, and round-the-clock supervision. It was such a hard time, and my husband and I were a wreck. The doctors told us it was really just a wait-and-see type scenario, as we should just spend as much time as possible with him and hope for the best. So that's what we did. My husband was a store manager at a well-known supercenter at the time, and used his vacation time to be at the hospital with us. By the time his vacation ended, our son was still in the hospital, somewhat improving, but it was still really touch and go, and my husband felt like he needed to be there with us, so he asked for some more time off, and it was granted. He was told just to call and let them know when he could return, and they put him back on the schedule. As soon as our son was well enough to come home, my husband called his job to let them know he was able to return to work. Turns out, because of his attendance, they decided to demote him to another position. He'd be making less money, but not a significant amount, and we could understand where his employer was coming from, because they were generous with the time off they allowed him, and that our son's health issues weren't their problem. He's an employee, and he's supposed to be there. Whatever, we could still survive on his new salary, no big deal. Within 2 weeks of returning to work, my husband got injured at work. In order to continue working, his employer said he had to go to physical therapy before he could return again. So, he was out of work again. So soon after returning, after a few weeks of physical therapy, he was cleared to return to work, but his employer started drastically cutting his hours, and after all the expenses we incurred with our son's health issues, and my husband being out of work, our savings was almost entirely gone, and we were not going to be able to keep up with expenses much longer. At that time, my son had a lot of issues that required me to be able to be home to give him treatment for, and I couldn't return to work, so my husband started looking for another job with full-time hours so he could make ends meet. He quickly found a new job, making significantly less money, but still more than what he was making with his current employer's cut hours, so he took it and intended to keep looking for another job as well. We are steadily falling behind our bills and rent, and trying to put food on the table for our 2 children and provide everything a new baby needs, and we realize we are not going to be able to continue living where we are living. We explain this to our extremely kind landlord and are allowed out of our lease. We begin looking for a cheaper place with a short lease so that when things pick back up, we can move into another place. Eventually, we found a place that was incredibly cheap and ended up moving in. It was in a bad part of town, y'all, a part of Dallas that's well known for being a bad part of town, and if you're from Dallas, then you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. However, I'm homeschooling my daughter, and our son is still small, so I'm not worried about them going to school in the area, and I just figured it's only a few months, and when my husband is at work, the kids will stay inside. We were in a desperate situation, and I was trying to be positive. We would make do with what we had until we could do better. This place was a complete shithole. It used to be a house, but is now a duplex, and most of the other houses on our street are abandoned and have been vandalized, including both houses on each side of our home, and the street looks generally scary. However, our next-door neighbors are extremely kind, and it put me at ease to having them next to us, because if anything were to go wrong, they'd be right there. A couple weeks into being there, I start to relax. It's a shitty area, and not many people live on our street, but the few people I met were really cordial, and I didn't get any bad vibes from them. Mostly older people, and a few families, and seemingly no shady characters, much to my surprise. Now, because of all those factors, I began to feel more comfortable with the area, and think maybe I'm just judging it so harshly because of how run down it is, and because it is a notoriously bad town, so I begin to think that maybe it's run down doesn't mean it's bad, right? So instead of sitting in my backyard to smoke my cigarettes, I started sitting on my front porch. That was a huge mistake. As I'm sitting there smoking my cigarette, people watching, I see a man walk down the street I have not seen before, which isn't unusual in this type of neighborhood, so I remain vigilant, but also don't think much of it until my dog, who was just a small, elderly, well-behaved wiener dog, started losing her fucking mind when she noticed him. This is not normal behavior for her. She never barked at anyone. When she started barking, the guy stops dead in his tracks and stares directly at me and my dog, and starts pounding on his chest and throwing his arms up in the air like, "Come at me, bro." I was freaked out, and as I was about to turn around and go inside with my dog, something overcame her, and she sprinted right off my porch and directly towards a nut job in the street. When he saw that she was meaning fucking business, he started to walk away, quickly. Still, my dog kept following him and barking her tiny little ass off. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to get my dog, but I didn't want to walk up to this man. This went on for several seconds, and then the man turned around and started yelling at my dog, threatening her and making stomping motions like he was going to stomp on her head. I was scared and wanted to protect my dog, so I ran out to the street and scooped her up and ran inside. I heard the man yell behind me as I was running in that he was sorry. I went in, locked my doors, and tried to calm down and not let my kids see that I was shaken up. A few hours go by, and I wanted another cigarette, but I didn't want to go back out front to smoke, so I was just going to sit on my back porch when I realized I'd forgotten my cigarettes and lighter out front. I cautiously looked out into the street from the window to make sure the creep from earlier was good and gone before stepping out. But the porch is large and long, and from the window, you can't see the bench that sits between my door and my neighbor's door. When I step out, I'm absolutely stunned to see the man from earlier sitting on the porch, on the bench, between our doors. I immediately kind of froze up, and before I could say or do anything, he said he wanted to apologize for earlier, but he didn't want to scare me by knocking on my door. He explains he's just afraid of dogs, and he wasn't going to hurt my dog. He was just hoping to scare it off, I guess. I am lost for words, and I just kind of nod my head and wait for him to leave. He doesn't leave. He just fucking sits there, staring at me. This continued for a minute, before my daughter broke the silence by coming to the door and saying that my pot of water is boiling over. This is when I really started panicking, because now he knows I have kids, and I'm obviously home alone, no car in the driveway, and at this time my phone was out of service. It was a hard time, and I just couldn't afford my phone bill. So I'm terrified about everything that could happen. Neighbors aren't home, I don't have the car, no way of calling anyone. I felt sick to my stomach. I tell my daughter to go sit down, and then I'm coming. I tell the man I have to go, and book it into the house faster than I've ever moved in my life. I keep looking out the blinds for the man to leave. After about 5 minutes, he walks away. 10 minutes later, there's a knock on my window. Yes, my window. I peek out, it's the man. I reach over to the fireplace, grab my fire poker just in case, and I very, very slightly crack the window. He asks if dinner is done, and if he can have some food. I tell him I don't have enough and I'm sorry. He goes on to explain he's homeless, and he hasn't eaten in days and he's starving. I know it's really stupid, but I have a soft spot for helping the homeless, and I hate seeing people go hungry. So I told him if he were to go stand across the street at the park, I would put a plate of food on the porch for him, that I would give him something to eat and drink. He agreed, and he stayed across the street while I placed the food on the porch. After he ate, he left. When my husband got home, he found the used dishes on our porch. I told him what it was about, and he scolded me, rightfully so. After that, days went by and I didn't see the man again. I just assumed he was just a passerby, down on his luck, and was genuinely afraid of tiny dogs, wasn't well socialized, and meant no harm. But I was wrong. Shocking, I know. Eventually, I started seeing him walk down the street again. Occasionally, he'd see me through the window, smile and wave. That went on without incident for about 2 weeks off and on. Then one day my dog starts flying off the handle, flipping her shit again, and I assume it's because my neighbor's rather large pit bull had gone into her side of the backyard, and I want to let my neighbor know, so he could come get her. When I stepped out, my neighbor's car is gone, and the man is again sitting on the bench, and doesn't even seem to realize I'm there. He's just sitting there slapping himself in the face, drooling and scratching his face and neck. He's rocking back and forth and talking to himself, saying all types of shit I can't understand, and he doesn't seem to hear my dog barking or notice anything that's going on around him. I'm thoroughly fucking afraid of what I'm seeing. I don't say a word, and quietly back up and go back inside the house to figure out how to get him off my fucking porch. Then I remember he's afraid of dogs, and maybe if he sees my neighbor's giant pit bull, he will snap the fuck out of whatever trance he's in and move along. My next move is undoubtedly stupid, but I'm worried about this man sitting on my porch while my kids are home, and my husband and neighbors are gone, so I want his ass to go the hell away. So I grab my dog's leash, go to my backyard, put the leash on my neighbor's dog. I tell my daughter to get our dog, go to the back bedroom, lock the door and sit in there, and watch TV while her brother is napping, and she does. I then gather all my frickin' courage and walk this massive pit bull around to my front porch and just stand there waiting for this lunatic to snap out of it and realize I have a huge dog out there and hope he's gonna run off. Cookie, the neighbor's dog, starts barking upon seeing him, and finally he slowly looks up and smiles this absolute creepiest smile I've ever seen and says, "Hey there. I didn't know you had 2 dogs." He said this normally in a normal tone, as if he hadn't just been acting like some kind of psycho talking to himself and doing all sorts of odd shit. So I said yes, but she really doesn't like people she doesn't know, and sometimes she bites. He got a terrified look on his face and actually jumped over the railing rather than walking past his dog and I. When my husband came home, Creeper was again walking down the street and stopping to talk to my husband. I see the interaction in the driveway, and I step out to see what's going on, and apparently, he's asking my husband to bum a cigarette. My husband honestly didn't have any on him, and I was out, so he told him no, we didn't have any. And this was the first time my husband had ever seen this man, so I had no idea who he was at the time. The man said, "Okay, fine. Can I have some water?" Giving my husband the same homeless spiel he gave me. My husband, who also has a lot of compassion for the homeless, gave him a few dollars and told me to go in and fill a jug of water and give it to him, which I did. We handed him the water and walked to the porch. When we get to the steps, we hear the man cussing under his breath and talking to himself, and turn around to see him pouring out the water we had just given him, calling us bitches and motherfuckers, and we just kind of look at each other like, what the actual fuck? He then calmly turns around, throws the empty jug of water on the ground, and then proceeds to pull a pack of cigarettes out of his pocket and throws it at us. What the hell? He was just asking for a cigarette. He was mad that we didn't have any. Turns out he already had a pack, and then he throws them at us. My husband told him to get the fuck off our driveway and not to ever come back again. I told my husband he was the guy that had been coming around, and I thought he was on drugs and had serious mental issues. After this, my husband immediately calls to have my phone number turned on, and starts having his dad stay with the kids at night while he's at work. Once again sees that my father-in-law is there at all times now, we started actually seeing less of him. Actually, I only ever saw him once after this, and that was in the back of a police car at a nearby gas station. More on that in a minute. After not seeing him for a while and thinking he got the hint, we got out one morning and found out there was a poopy fucking toilet paper all over our lawn and porch. We immediately know it was him. We all asked the neighbors if they saw anything, and they claim they haven't, so we don't bother calling the police, because it's gonna be no use, since no one saw anything, and we have no proof. We didn't even know his name. He's a homeless guy. Plus, cops in the area are known to not be so great anyhow, so it just feels like a dead end, to be honest. After the toilet paper and toilet shit incident, there's 2 more shit-related instances where poop was smeared all over a windshield, and then another time on our front door. Along with it, you guessed it, poopy toilet paper strewn everywhere. A week or so after the poop incidents, we were about to pull up to a gas station and see him in handcuffs on the curb in front of the store. I never found out why, but I was so happy to see him being pulled into a police car. After that, we ended up moving to Austin and getting as far away as we could from that situation. Things are great now. My husband has an amazing job, my children are doing wonderfully, and I've never lived anywhere like that again. I don't know what ever became of him, but I pray that he got some help. So that's one of my crazy long stories. If you guys enjoyed hearing about my misfortune and would like to hear any more about my run-ins with weirdos, I'm happy to share. Again, sorry for the length. Thanks for reading. If y'all made it to the end, you're real champs.